are 27 different body types, but there are also 9 body type categories. Each of the types in the body matrix is made up of width, length, and shape. And today I'm going to break down each of these categories: wide, medium, narrow, long, medium, short, straight, medium, round. And I'm going to be using you guys as examples, real women, so that you can really see the differences between the types. Let's start with a wide body width. Width is found in the upper body and shoulders. They might have your typical triangle shape, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have narrow hips if you have width. It's all about that upper body, so it's not about the ratio between your shoulders and your hips necessarily, just more about the proportions of your upper body. I think width is one of those things you actually know. Those with width tend to be familiar with the fact they have width because it's something that they tend to struggle with. It could be that they have a broad back, it could be that they have broad shoulders and they struggle to fit into the regular size of their jackets, their dresses, and they often need to go up a size because of their upper body. And this is true no matter what weight they are. When they gain weight, they tend to gain weight also in their upper body rather than in their legs. But again, that's not always necessarily true. With all of these categories, you have to think of it like you're looking at the overall picture. So you might not need to go up a size in jackets, but you can see very clearly in your line drawing that your shoulders are the widest point in your frame, in which case I would still definitely consider width for yourself. Narrow body width. They tend to have a narrow upper body. They often get straps or jackets falling off their shoulders because they're so narrow, and they're more narrow than the kind of typical proportions. They might be pear-shaped and their weight might lean more in their lower half, but this isn't always the case. They can still have narrow hips, for example. The point is, when you look at their line drawing, their shoulders don't extend far out from the rest of their upper body. Everything is quite straight up and down, so their shoulder points are not very wide or broad. They're small. For medium body width, you don't relate to either of these things. You're neither very broad nor very narrow in your upper body. This includes upper back. Those with medium body width look somewhere in the middle. From a certain angle, you could think of them as narrow, and from another, you could think of them as wide, so they fall somewhere between. And they comfortably wear their regular size in jackets and dresses. They don't really have any troubles. When using that as a marker, make sure you think about why that's the case. For example, my mum often has dresses be too big in the upper back. That's not because she is particularly narrow, it's because she has a wider waist point. So make sure you know yourself well. You've got to think about the why as well as the actual outcome. So is it that you have to size up in jackets because of your shoulders? Next, let's do body shape. Those with a straight body type have a frame that's made up of sharp, angular lines. This can mean having an undefined waist, and often does, but also there are people with straight lines who have a kind of defined waist. I think what we've got to remember with straight lines especially is that most women have some form of curviness, the typical female figure. It's just whether those curves are made up of round shapes or sharp shapes, and also it's whether you lean more straight or more rounded. Are you more sharp or more soft? Those with a straight shape tend to have square shoulders, which have a sharp point at the edge rather than being rounded. They tend to have straight rectangle figure, but not always. An example of a straight hip, that can mean straight up and down, so you've got very sharp hips. It can also mean having kind of like a hexagonal shape to your hips rather than being rounded and curved. The lines are more straight and angular, creating this kind of almost hexagon shape with your hips rather than a rounded curve. That's typical in someone with straight lines, for instance. Those with a round body shape are soft and circular throughout their frame. This does not mean that they appear round like a circle, but more that there's lots of circles in their frame. So they are closer to your more typical hourglass, right? With a round circle on the top half of the body and the round circle on the bottom half of the body. These don't have to be even. For example, you might be more rounded in the chest and have really narrow hips, but the shape of those hips will be rounded without too many sharp or straight angular points and lines. They tend to have rounded shoulders, and I really think shoulders is a really core differentiator between straight and round lines. It's sometimes easier than chest and hips, actually. Those with a rounded shape often have your more typical curvy silhouette, but not necessarily. Those with a medium body shape are neither very rounded nor very straight. They wouldn't describe themselves as particularly angular or rounded when you look at pictures and line drawings of yourself. They're not extreme in their shape. You couldn't really say whether they're straight and sharp in their frame or whether they're soft and rounded. From some angles, they look kind of soft, and from some angles, they look kind of straight, and they could fall easily either way. Length. Those with a long body length tend to be above 5'7", but this is definitely not always the case. For most people, 5'7" and above, I would definitely consider length though. It can also be that you look tall. This is what we call your vertical line. So this is how long you appear. And this doesn't mean how long you appear next to others, because obviously, I mean, literally if someone's 6 foot and you're 5'8", 5, you're gonna look shorter than them. That's just basic maths. It's more about your own proportions and how you are in relation to your body. Those with length tend to have long limbs, and their head is likely to be proportionally small in the rest of their body, which is what creates this illusion of length. Another core visual that I use to decide someone's length is the ratio between their neck and their waist and their waist and their knee. If you have a really long space between your waist, kind of just like above the hip point, your waist, and your knee, if that's much longer than the neck to waist ratio, you're really likely to be long. Those with a short body length tend to be below 5'3". Again, not always the case, but I would, if you are below 5'3", I would usually consider shortness, or it could be that you look really short in your vertical line. So those who look short tend to have a head that's slightly large in proportion to the rest of the frame, creating this doll-like appearance. Think of Sabrina Carpenter, where she looks like a doll. She has a very short vertical line. Those who are short tend to have short limbs and kind of like small hands and feet. They have a short ratio. So that ratio we talked about, neck to waist, waist to knee. Their waist to knee tends to be quite short, so it's almost even to the neck to waist ratio. So it looks literally like one, let's say they're rounded, it's like one circle on top of another because they're short. So that space is almost even, or it could be like 2 squares on top of another, say. Those with medium body length tend to be between 5'4" and 5'6". They neither look long nor short. You believe them based on their proportions to be between 5'4" and 5'6". If you saw a photo of them or you saw their line drawing, you would think they're not very extreme in their length. Their head tends to be proportionate to the rest of their frame, creating this balanced appearance. And they have a unextreme waist to knee ratio. It's neither very long nor very short, but somewhere in the middle. Be careful not to confuse looks long and I thought she would be tall based on her facial appearance. Someone could have really petite facial features, which are very kind of cute and innocent, and often we expect those people to be short. That is not the same as reading somebody's vertical line and seeing a proper picture of them and doing a proper line drawing and assessing that vertical line based on the data that you have. An assumption is not the same as an analysis. Another assumption I often see is that narrowness equates to shortness. I had a friend who was actually 5'8", and she always used to get people saying, wow, I thought you'd be shorter. I thought you were shorter than that. Like, I don't believe you. And it's because she was very narrow and she had sweet, innocent features. But I am so sure that if you actually looked at her vertical line, short lines would not be best for her because she had that length. I think you could maybe argue that she was medium, but not really. And remember, length is a combination of how tall you are and how tall you look. So if you're 5'1", you might look a little taller than you are and look 5'3". This language often makes people think you might therefore have a long vertical line. But no, if you're 5'1" and you look 5'3", you still look short. So I would still suggest short lines for you. And if you have that short ratio still, short lines are definitely gonna look best. Whereas if you were 5'1" and I had expected you to be 5'5", I would put you in medium because I expected you to be within that range. So those are the 9 body type categories. If you have any more questions, please leave them in the comments and I will use them to inform future videos. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.